periods in the pandemic. Periods in the pandemic. And our guest is the Vice President of the Nigerian Medical Association in Cross River State and the President of Pink Africa Foundation, talking about Dr. Nchewi. And a very good evening to you. Welcome to Winning COVID.
Good evening, Hit FM. Good evening, listeners.
Good evening, the world, because we can hear you from everywhere.
Oh, interesting. Good evening, everybody. I'm Vice Chairman, Nigerian Medical Association, Cross River State.
Okay.
For hygiene. To prevent yourself from contacting COVID-19, hand washing, you need to wash your hands several times. You also need soap to wash. And when you're menstruating, you need adequate water supply to also wash yourself. You also need soap to wash. And then the hand sanitizers too go hand in hand. So the difference is just the material you use to soak blood when it has to do with hygiene. You need to take your bath several times. You go out and you come back, you need to take your bath, clean up yourself before you interact with the people at home. The same thing, if you go out and you're soaked, you need to come back, clean up yourself before you can get yourself back to interact. So that's the first basic similarity between both issues. But menstruation is not an illness.
Okay.
That's the next thing. Menstruation is not an illness at all, contrary to the myths that we hear that we first heard in China and then Tanzania followed, where they said that being in your menses predisposes you or increase your vulnerability to COVID-19. There's no such relationship like that medically.
So that rumor has been dispelled.
That has been debunked. And comfort that women experience have also been heightened by the pandemic. The pandemic-related movement restrictions, as well as health facilities not operating at optimal capacity in some areas, has made it difficult for people to access adequate menstrual hygiene services or reproductive health services, especially when people have menstrual related disorders. For example, somebody is bleeding excessively, maybe due to some diseases affecting the ovaries or the uterus, and then severe low abdominal cramps. The person is unable to access the hospital because of movement restrictions. So those are the telltale experiences that are worsened by the pandemic. And the next thing we need to know is that the economic fallout of the pandemic has also affected access to menstrual or period supplies.
Tell us more about that. I find that very interesting. How
it's difficult because of the lockdown, and most shops are closed, yes, and then the distribution chain is broken, haulage and all that. You know that most of the materials we have for menstrual hygiene are not produced locally, except for the washable parts that we are trying to advocate for. Most of the materials are outsourced from different states, and some of them even from foreign outside the country. So now that everywhere is shut down, we don't have access to these materials. The stores that had these in stores, they've actually they are sold out. So women are forced to use alternatives that may not be healthy, and these alternatives will predispose them to infections. And the common alternatives we find when we go to the field are rags or a piece of clothing. And sometimes, menses itself, you cannot negotiate when your menses will come. You can only follow the pattern and know that maybe every month I have a 21-day cycle, and then count and know exactly. But to say because your experience in the pandemic, your period will just stop for you, it doesn't occur that way. Now you don't have access to menstrual materials and you must flow. So what do you do? So the girls in the rural spaces, the vulnerable populations, those in IDP camps, refugees, immigrants, and then even those that are physically challenged have difficulty sourcing for the adequate materials. Then sometimes you used a particular kind of pad and the stores around have run out of those ones. Maybe you have some discomfort when you use the other type of menstrual material. So what do? Resort to cotton materials, and then if you don't have access to cotton material, the stores are closed. It's not just for Cross River State that we're blessed and we can move around, go to the market, but for neighboring states that the stores open on specific days. And what if the day you're menstruating is the day the stores are closed? What will you do as a woman? You're forced to look for alternatives. And alternatives that we have found out in the field include rags, a piece of material. Some people even use socks to soak up menstrual blood. We found out that panting pants and old pants with the pants currently, and what if you don't have enough pants to go around? So I have 5 pants and I have 5 pants, an example, and I'm menstruating and I have to change 3 times a day, and you're wearing one. That means you don't even have for the next day. So you're forced to use alternatives, and the alternatives, so they are very uncomfortable. Like what we found out, newspapers, old school notebooks. And if the period catches you in the farm, what do? Resort to leaves.
So all of these things that you're saying, Dr. Njeri, actually are very interesting and call for a lot of further exploring and discussion. I know for a fact that governments around the world, different non-governmental organizations, etc., private organizations, have been distributing palliative materials this COVID-19 period. Have you, in the course of your work, have you come across maybe people taking care to include menstrual materials in these palliatives that are being distributed? Do they think it's important enough to be a part of the conversation on palliatives?
And that's one of the reasons I agreed to come here. I've seen many NGOs, local and foreign, involving themselves in helping to reduce the burden of care for different families, especially for those in the rural spaces. All we see is rice, beans, money, tokens given, but nobody includes menstrual hygiene materials. Just few NGOs go a long way to say, oh, let's add menstrual hygiene materials. And these
ones are the ones that have been focusing on menstrual hygiene before the pandemic.
Exactly. Okay. So those who that is their key area, or where the humanitarian area, go a long way to provide menstrual hygiene materials. Like for us in Pink Africa, we do the washable parts. But what was our problem? We weren't able to order for supplies from Onitsha. So we had to locally source the materials. And of course, you don't it's more expensive. You don't even see, especially when we're looking for the fleece material, like a face towel material, we don't see. And we are forced to make use of what the alternatives, the next thing that is close enough. And for us, we are very particular about up to the standard of materials that we use. So instead of saying we're going to provide for 200 girls, we're able to do that. You reduce the number of supplies.
So you have quality materials.
Yes, quality material, but reduce in quantity. So we're saying if you are a humanitarian, I know that there's a lot of donor uncertainties right now. So the donor agencies are not even giving out because they're not sure what the post-COVID era or post-COVID economy will bring to them. So there's not much money coming from outside for us to say, oh, let's increase the number of menstrual supplies. So we're saying if you're a well-meaning Nigerian and you have that extra money to buy an extra bag of rice, you can buy like 10 bags of rice and use the cost of 1 bag of rice to provide menstrual supplies, pads, tissue paper, soap, and I say for the young girls a little bit of perfume, because we know it's essential to also smell nice when you're menstruating.
Okay. Well, if you're just joining us, this is Winning COVID on Hit 95.9 FM. It's supported by Thought Foundation. We have the Vice Chairman of the Nigerian Medical Association in Cross River State, Dr. Njeri, talking about periods and the pandemic.
The female medical workers, because 70% of the global force are females. Think about when you need to wear your PPE and then you're menstruating. That's hard work. So it's psychological work. And then the physical work, exactly, and the discomfort. So it's not easy to menstruate and also be a healthcare worker. And then the next thing we want to say is that the doctors, administrators, and government taking care of quarantine centers should also ensure that menstrual materials are available. Because that's sensitive issues.
Isolation centers, yes. Very important. I couldn't have put it better myself. Very important. That's why it's good to have.
And then the last thing is that periods don't stop, not even in the pandemics, but they can be paused by you getting pregnant. So the issue of contraceptive matters a lot.
We'll definitely have another conversation on contraceptives, and then we'll probably have you on for that as well. Thank you very much, Dr. Njeri, for being here this evening. Thank you.